You would bring down the caliber of attendees. Those words sliced through the air like a razor, leaving a cold sting in their wake. I stood motionless in the doorway of my boss's office, heart pounding in my chest, every muscle in my face trained to keep my expression neutral. But inside, something cracked. Mark Sullivan, no relation, didn't even bother to look up from his laptop. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his Montblanc pen against his chin as if weighing something terribly important. "It's not personal, Laura," he said, with a smug kind of faux sympathy that made my stomach turn. "It's just, the wellness retreat is for executives who project a certain image. Clients will be there. Industry partners. It's high level." He finally looked up, his eyes sliding from my sensible flats to my off-the-rack navy blazer. I knew what he saw. No designer bag, no curated social media aesthetic, no hint of the luxury lifestyle he thought defined success. "I see," I said, carefully keeping my voice steady. "Thank you for clarifying." I walked out without another word. In the open office beyond his door, heads dipped quickly back toward computer screens. But I could feel the eyes on me. Hear the buzz of thoughts they wouldn't say out loud. I'd always known I didn't fit the mold at Klenner & Wolf. The glossy PR agency prided itself on image, polish, and connections. I had one of those three. And it wasn't the one you could see. My first instinct was to go to the bathroom, lock the door, and cry in a stall like I had the first month I started here. But that was years ago. That version of Laura was long gone. I returned to my desk instead, where a folder labeled Urgent Change Requests, Wilder Campaign, had conveniently landed in my inbox. The Wilder Campaign. My campaign. Already approved, already finalized. And now Mark's latest move to keep me too busy to ask questions. The retreat started in 5 days. Clearly, he was hoping I'd be too buried in re-edits to think about it. I stared at the screen and took a breath. If only he knew. If only any of them knew. You see, Sullivan Wellness wasn't just some high-end, invite-only retreat tucked into the cliffs of the California coast. It was my family's legacy. Built by my grandfather, expanded by my mother, and now co-managed, quietly, by me. The name Sullivan in our company's branding wasn't just a coincidence. It was mine. But no one at Klenner & Wolf knew that. And I'd made sure of it. 3 years ago, fresh off my master's in marketing strategy, I'd made the deliberate choice not to go into the family business. I wanted to prove that I could succeed on merit, build a name for myself based on work ethic, not inheritance. So I took the job here. Mid-level, modest pay, long hours, a rented apartment in a neighborhood no one in the agency would ever visit by choice. I arrived each day with coffee stains on my sleeve and a tote bag that had once been a giveaway at a conference. It was all intentional. It was real. And I had learned something, painfully and repeatedly, in my time here. Real doesn't always get rewarded. While Mark presented my campaigns as his own, while I stayed late polishing decks that my male counterparts took credit for, while I was overlooked for promotions in favor of people with designer heels and social media followers, every single move I made was clocked and calculated. I didn't fight. Not then. I observed. I kept records. I kept receipts. And I waited. Because sometimes the best way to be underestimated is to lean into it. As I reopened the Wilder campaign file and began making the unnecessary revisions, I pulled out my phone. There was one number in there I hadn't used in over 6 months. Mom. I typed, "Hey, are the Ocean View Villas booked this weekend? I need a favor." The 3 dots appeared immediately. "For work?" "Something like that," I typed back. And then, after a pause, "Make sure it's the Clifftop Estate. And tell Natalie I'll be arriving early." I sat back and stared at the screen. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was a reminder. A warning. A truth that Mark Sullivan had failed to see. He thought I didn't belong at the retreat. He had no idea it was my retreat. By the next morning, the retreat was all anyone could talk about. The break room was alive with chatter about spa treatments and sound baths, as if we weren't a PR agency and instead a yoga influencer collective. I overheard talk of chakra alignment, luxury sleep masks, and someone booking a juice cleanse in preparation, as if green smoothies were currency for corporate enlightenment. I stirred my coffee slowly, the bitter taste grounding me while I listened. "Are you going to bring your new boyfriend, or?" Julia asked Serena over the counter, barely whispering, but loud enough to be overheard. Serena snorted. "Oh God, no. Mark made it clear. This retreat is strictly business. Plus, they're being super selective with the guest list." Selective. That word echoed in my mind. Like some velvet rope was being drawn to separate the image-perfect elite from the me. I didn't look like them. I didn't sound like them. And according to Mark, I didn't belong with them either. Back at my desk, I opened my email. A new calendar invite had landed in my inbox. Q2 Wellness Retreat. Attendee briefing. I clicked. My name wasn't on the list, but Jason's was. So was Meredith's. And Henry, the intern who once asked me how to spell strategic. I stared at the screen, stunned for a beat too long. My hands were perfectly still, but my jaw clenched just slightly. Then I did something that would seem unremarkable to anyone watching. I opened a spreadsheet. It wasn't a project plan or a client pitch. It was a personal document I'd kept tucked away for almost a year. I called it the ledger. On it were dates, assignments, and names. Times when my work had been reassigned. Meetings I'd been left out of. Presentations where Mark had borrowed my ideas. All neatly documented and quietly updated. It wasn't just a record of mistreatment. It was a story of patterns. A subtle campaign of erasure. And I knew how powerful a well-organized narrative could be. My phone buzzed. A message from Mom. "Natalie confirmed the Clifftop estate is reserved in your name. Staff is prepped. You're on the schedule. Anything else?" I smiled slightly. Please don't tell anyone who it's for. Especially not the manager. I want the surprise to be clean. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a simple, "Understood." That evening, I stayed late. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to see who else did. Mark was still there, of course. Hovering over Meredith's shoulder as she fumbled through a slide deck I'd practically written. He didn't even acknowledge me when I walked by. And that's when I knew something important. He didn't suspect a thing. He thought I'd been dismissed, discarded, and forgotten. He didn't realize he was walking straight into my story. The next day, the company issued formal travel instructions, chartered transport to the retreat, arrival times, luggage guidelines, and a note reminding everyone to bring their best selves. I almost laughed. My best self? They'd never even met her. A colleague passed by my desk and muttered, "You okay, Laura?" "Of course," I said with a calm smile. "Have fun at the retreat." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of fake smiles and last-minute prep meetings. I completed every task Mark threw at me, every urgent revision, every final version of the Wilder deck. And I did it with quiet precision, the way only someone with nothing left to prove can. The night before departure, I sat in my apartment surrounded by papers, mock-ups, and an untouched suitcase. I didn't need to pack. My bag had been sent ahead. The Clifftop estate wasn't just another villa on the Sullivan wellness property. It was the villa. A sprawling private residence with an ocean-facing deck, its own yoga dome, and private chefs. It was also where my mother had once hosted the governor, and where I'd learned to swim when I was 4. I poured myself a glass of wine and looked out at the city. It felt strange, this quiet between what had been and what was about to come. The calm before a different kind of storm. I wasn't going to show up and scream. There wouldn't be a confrontation in the boardroom or an email blast calling everyone out. This was going to be elegant, professional, undeniable. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't explosive. It's graceful. It's silent. And it begins when people finally see what they refused to before. The next morning, while my coworkers boarded their chartered bus, I was already wheels up on a private flight arranged through my family's estate. 3 hours later, I stepped off the plane and into sunlight that smelled like salt and citrus. Natalie was waiting. "Welcome home, Miss Sullivan," she said with a wink. "Your guests will be arriving at noon." I nodded. Let's make sure everything is perfect. Because this time I wasn't being left behind. This time I was leading the way. The air smelled different at the estate, not just of the sea breeze and blooming hibiscus, but of something less tangible, something sharper. Change. The clifftop estate stood as regal as ever, its white stone glinting in the morning sun, framed by bougainvillea that had grown wilder since I last visited. Natalie had already opened all the windows. The ocean murmured softly beyond the glass balcony doors. "You remember the layout?" she asked as she handed me the tablet with room assignments. I smiled faintly. Every corner. We walked together through the main living area, her heels clicking lightly across the polished stone floor. The team had outdone themselves. Fresh tropical fruit in crystal bowls, welcome gifts arranged in locally woven baskets, the scent of sandalwood and citrus diffused from hand-carved burners, serenity with a price tag, $7,500 a night to be exact. "Should we chill champagne for the arrival?" Natalie asked. "Definitely. But wait until they're inside. I wanted to hit them all at once." She nodded, already walking toward the back kitchen. Her professionalism was flawless, but I could tell. She was enjoying this as much as I was. At precisely 11:56 a.m., I received a text from the front gate. "Your party has arrived." I took position in the main foyer, half concealed behind one of the ornate columns. Not hiding, just watching, measuring, and waiting. The resort manager, Carlos, tall, composed, with decades of hospitality under his belt, stepped forward to greet the incoming guests. His voice was warm and unhurried. "Welcome to Sullivan Wellness. We are honored to host Klenner and Wolf for your second quarter wellness retreat. Before we assign your rooms, we'd like to extend a very special welcome to one of our returning guests, Miss Laura Sullivan." That was the moment. I stepped into view. The chatter dropped instantly. Silence rippled through the group like a shockwave. I saw it on every face. Recognition dawning, confusion morphing into disbelief. And then, on Mark's face, that flicker of something primal. Fear. "Laura?" He choked out, one foot planted like he was preparing to either run or apologize. I gave a polite, professional smile. "Good afternoon, everyone. I'm thrilled to welcome you to the Clifftop Estate." Someone, Julia, I think, actually gasped. "This estate? You're the Sullivan?" Henry the intern said, almost stumbling over the words. I nodded. "Sullivan Wellness has been in my family for 3 generations. I co-manage this property along with several others. And this..." I gestured to the open glass doors leading to the ocean view terrace. "This is home." Mark still hadn't moved. His lips parted slightly, but no words came. Carlos, the consummate professional, never skipped a beat. "Miss Sullivan has graciously reserved the estate for your team's exclusive use. She will also be managing your experience this weekend. Room assignments, scheduling, guest access. She has full authority." At that, several faces turned toward me. Not with contempt, not with pity, but with interest. A few even smiled. The shift was palpable. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't overlooked. I wasn't a quiet girl in a navy blazer. I was the host. I was the Sullivan in Sullivan Wellness. "I've taken the liberty of customizing your rooms based on your work preferences," I said, tapping on the tablet. "For example, Jason and Henry, your room has an ocean view and private workspace. Julia, you'll love the Garden Suites reading nook." I left Mark for last. "And Mark?" I said, carefully keeping my voice light. "You'll be in the Serenity Annex. It's a bit removed from the main house, more private." I didn't mention that the Serenity Annex was originally built for staff housing, or that it lacked an ocean view, or that it had no direct line to the infinity pool, spa access, or executive cocktail deck. He blinked. "Is that suitable for an executive retreat?" "I thought you might enjoy the quiet." I replied, tilting my head. It's all about wellness, isn't it? The others chuckled nervously. Carlos began distributing keycards, and guests trickled into the estate like tourists entering a cathedral. Still, Mark lingered behind. When the others had gone, he approached me, slower now, his usual confidence peeled away. Laura, this is all a misunderstanding. Had I known... But you didn't. I interrupted, voice even. That's the point. He opened his mouth again, but I turned away, not unkindly, just firmly. There's a welcome brunch in an hour, I said. Try the papaya salad. It's a favorite of mine. Then I walked off. No need for dramatic exits. The drama had already arrived. The welcome brunch went by in a blur of tropical colors and half-hearted small talk. People weren't sure how to act around me now. Julia, who had barely acknowledged my existence 2 days ago, kept finding reasons to sit nearby, asking about the flower arrangements, the view, the chef. Jason offered to help carry plates back from the buffet. Henry stammered through compliments on the genius of the layout. It would have been amusing if it weren't so transparent. Power shifts are awkward things, especially for those who benefited from the old rules. Only Mark kept his distance, lingering near the far edge of the terrace as though proximity might expose his guilt to the sunlight. I watched it all unfold with a composed smile. Inside, my thoughts were less still, because while everyone was recalibrating how to treat me, I was busy remembering how they'd treated me before. 3 years. That's how long I'd spent minimizing myself. Not because I was ashamed of who I was, but because I wanted to earn respect the hard way. I'd believed, naively maybe, that if I worked hard enough, smart enough, long enough, it would be enough. I wanted my success to mean something. But at Klenner and Wolf, it had never been about the work. It had always been about image. Mark had made sure of that. I still remembered the day he'd accidentally left me off the invite to a client gala I'd helped organize. The day my work was presented under someone else's name. The times he'd smirked during meetings when I spoke, as if he couldn't quite believe I'd opened my mouth. Now he couldn't quite meet my eyes. Funny how that works. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, turning the ocean into molten gold, staff prepared the main terrace for dinner. Candlelit tables, soft ambient music, a breeze that whispered secrets across the linen napkins. Natalie approached me as I checked the final seating chart. Everything's in place, she said. Shall we? I gave a small nod. Let's begin. The guests were seated just as the first course arrived, grilled scallops over chilled coconut rice, paired with a crisp white wine from my mother's personal vineyard. I took the seat at the head of the longest table. No one questioned it. I didn't have to ask permission anymore. Conversation buzzed around me in cautious tones. People were trying. I gave them that. But beneath their new politeness was a current of uncertainty. Who was I, really? The Laura they had ignored for years? Or this poised, silent power in white linen? Both, I wanted to tell them. But I didn't. I let them wonder. About halfway through the second course, Mark finally spoke. This is impressive, he said, his voice just loud enough to carry down the table. You've clearly put a lot of thought into this. His tone wasn't mocking. It was careful, calculated. I like to create experiences, I replied, sipping my wine. He nodded slowly as though searching for safe ground. I didn't know. About your background. Your family, I know, I said simply. That's how I wanted it. Silence again. Only the clink of cutlery, the rush of wind against the glass railing. It wasn't personal. Mark tried again. You just didn't present yourself like someone ready for executive visibility. The retreat was a reflection of your values. I finished for him. Yes, I know. Across the table, I saw Jason pause mid-bite, caught in the tension like a deer in headlights. Mark let out a breath. If I'd known... You might have treated me differently, I offered. He looked at me. Really looked. And this time, I saw something break in his expression. The understanding that no explanation would sound right, that his excuses weren't landing. I leaned forward just slightly. You didn't fail to recognize my worth because I hid who I was, Mark. You failed because you only ever saw what you wanted to see. He sat back, eyes flicking toward the others who were now uncomfortably quiet. That's what image culture does, I continued, my voice calm, steady. It rewards polish over potential, familiarity over talent. People like me who don't fit your mold, we don't get invited to the table, so we build our own. And then gently I smiled, but sometimes we still make room at ours. The rest of the dinner passed with a different energy. Respect, caution, maybe even admiration. But I didn't need any of it to be loud. The message had been received. And the real conversation about what would happen next had only just begun. The morning after the dinner, the estate felt quieter. The kind of stillness that happens after a storm. Not destruction, but clarity. I stood barefoot on the balcony of my suite, watching the waves kiss the cliffside far below. A hummingbird zipped past the railing, then darted into the garden. It was the same garden my mother had designed to attract pollinators. The same garden I'd helped plant when I was 13, digging my fingers into the earth, not caring that I got dirt under my nails. Back then, I believed every problem could be fixed with effort and intention. I still believed that, mostly. But yesterday had shaken something loose. I hadn't planned on speaking during dinner. I'd intended to let the space speak for itself. The villa, the view, the seating chart that placed interns at ocean-facing tables and Mark near the service entrance. A poetic sort of justice. But when Mark tried to explain himself, I couldn't stay silent. Because the truth was, I didn't want revenge. I wanted recognition, accountability, change. I wanted the next Laura who walked through those agency doors to be seen, without needing a family legacy to demand it. Later that morning, I walked down to the wellness studio where the team was gathering for a meditation session. Carlos met me outside, tablet in hand, always one step ahead. I thought we'd shift the schedule, I told him. I have something I want the team to experience. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded. Within an hour, everyone had been ushered to the ocean deck for an unplanned session labeled Perspective and Reflection. I stood at the front, wind tousling my hair, barefoot on the warm stone. No podium, no performance. Just me. I want to thank all of you for being here, I began, my voice calm but resonant over the surf. This weekend was never about shaming anyone. It wasn't about flaunting wealth or power. They were listening now, really listening. It was about holding up a mirror, about seeing how we judge and what we value. Mark sat near the back, hands folded tightly in his lap. I came to Klenner and Wolf because I wanted to succeed without using my family name. I wanted to know what I was capable of, outside of privilege. I chose to wear neutral suits and drive a used car because I thought it would level the playing field. I paused. The weight of it hit harder when said aloud. And what I found was that the playing field doesn't level, not on its own, not when people in power reinforce the same patterns over and over. Silence. No one dared look away. This isn't just about one retreat or one manager. It's about how we evaluate potential. It's about what kind of people we promote, what kind of voices we amplify, and who we leave behind in the process. I saw Julia wipe her cheek quickly, pretending it was the wind. I continued. I'm not here to replace anyone. I'm not even sure I want a seat at that table anymore. I want to build a better one where your title isn't more important than your integrity, one where ideas matter more than appearances. I let the words sit. Let the silence stretch long enough to make them uncomfortable. Because change always starts with discomfort. Which is why, I added, I'll be proposing a mentorship and advancement program funded through the Sullivan Foundation to support underrepresented voices in this industry, particularly women, people of color, and those without traditional access points. A few people blinked in surprise, but others, nodded. Jason, Serena, even Henry. This isn't about punishing the past, I finished. It's about rewriting the future. I stepped down, my heart pounding, but not from fear, from purpose. As the team dispersed in small clusters, some talking in hushed tones, others quiet and contemplative, Carlos approached with a smile that held approval. And something else. Respect. Nicely done, he said. Change doesn't always start loud. Sometimes it starts with a quiet storm. I nodded. And sometimes with a single invitation. Behind me, Mark remained seated, staring out at the horizon. He hadn't said a word, but I could feel the weight in his silence. Later that evening, I found a note slipped under my suite door, written in sharp, tidy handwriting. Laura, thank you for the mirror. I didn't like what I saw, but I needed to see it. If you're willing, I'd like to talk before we leave. M. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in my journal. I wasn't sure if I'd meet him yet. But I knew this much. The power he once held over me was gone, and what came next was mine to decide. The final morning of the retreat arrived with a softness I hadn't expected. The sky wore a gauzy haze, the sun rising shyly behind it, casting a silver glow over the ocean. I stood at the edge of the Clifftop Estate's infinity pool, barefoot, holding a mug of jasmine tea. The house was still. Everyone else was sleeping in or packing. I had already made my decision. Mark's note from the night before sat tucked inside my notebook. I hadn't replied. Not yet. I needed to know I wasn't doing it out of politeness or guilt or even pity. I needed it to be intentional, because everything from now on would be. I turned away from the view and walked inside, where the last session of the retreat, a closing circle, was scheduled to begin in less than an hour. Natalie had arranged the chairs in a wide arc beneath the veranda, facing the ocean. Cushions, water bottles, light blankets, the kind of thoughtful hospitality my family was known for. As the team gathered, I watched how they moved. Slower, more aware. The usual workplace peacocking had faded. Titles didn't seem to matter as much here. Maybe it was the sun. Or the setting. Or maybe they were starting to see the cracks in the system they had once defended. Mark arrived last. Not late, just deliberately not early. He took the farthest seat in the circle, said nothing, and folded his hands in his lap. Carlos welcomed everyone, offered a few reflective prompts, then gently passed the circle to me. I stood in the center, barefoot again. Not because I wanted to perform authenticity, but because I wanted to feel the ground beneath me. To be rooted, honest. We've all had time this weekend to reflect. I began, scanning the faces of people I had worked beside for years, and only just begun to truly see. And for me, this retreat hasn't just been about rest or wellness. It's been about truth. Some shifted in their seats. A few glanced toward Mark. I didn't. For 3 years, I worked at Klenner & Wolf under a version of myself I thought would be more acceptable. Quieter, humble, low profile. I thought if I kept my head down, worked hard, and stayed professional, I'd earn respect. I paused. And for 3 years, that version of me was overlooked. Sometimes undermined, often dismissed. A few heads nodded, slowly. Serena looked away, blinking faster than usual. This weekend, you saw another side of me. One with privilege, with access, with power. But those things don't make me more valuable. They just made me visible. Silence now. Total. I don't regret hiding who I was, but I regret letting it convince me I had to play small. I looked over the group, letting them sit with it. Going forward, I'm stepping away from Klenner & Wolf. That got their attention. I'll be working with the Sullivan Foundation full-time. We're building a leadership incubator for underrepresented professionals in the creative and strategic industries, marketers, designers, brand thinkers, people who might otherwise never get a seat at the table. Murmurs now. Surprise. Maybe admiration. Maybe something else. I continued. But I won't leave without offering something back. I pulled a small envelope from my pocket and handed it to Carlos. It's a proposal. I explained. For Klenner and Wolf to partner with the foundation, to commit to mentorship, transparency in promotions, and paid internship opportunities for candidates without traditional access points. Carlos passed it along the circle. I didn't look at Mark. When we build better systems, we don't just help the overlooked. We help everyone rise. I stepped back, signaling I was done. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy. Full. Like the first real breath after being underwater. As people slowly dispersed, some came to shake my hand. Others hugged me. Even Julia, with tears in her eyes, whispered, "Thank you." And then it was just Mark and me, standing near the edge of the terrace, the wind lifting his blazer like it was trying to blow the last of his pretense away. "Can I say something?" he asked. I nodded once. "You're right. About everything." I waited. I don't know how I became that guy. The one who thought suits mattered more than substance. I see it now. In ways I didn't before. His voice was quiet, honest, not performative. "Maybe it's too late for me to change your opinion, but I want to try. To be different. Not because you caught me, but because you showed me." I met his eyes. "That's up to you, Mark. But I hope you do. For your sake. And for everyone who works under you." He nodded. "You're leaving the agency?" "Yes," I said. "But I'm not disappearing. I'm just showing up differently now." He offered a small, genuine smile. "Good. The world needs more Lauras." "No," I replied. "The world needs fewer gatekeepers." I turned away, my work here done. That afternoon, as the charter bus rolled away from the estate, I stood by the window of my suite, watching them leave. There was no applause, no fireworks, just a quiet knowing. For 3 years, I tried to prove I was enough by being less. Now, I knew the truth. I had always been enough. And from this day forward, I would never shrink again to fit inside someone else's idea of my worth.